Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'm going to be covering the weather for June 13th of 2023. Currently we kind of have a setup that is similar to yesterday's with that central slight risk in central Texas with a pretty long trailing slight risk across Dixie Valley out into the Atlantic Ocean, as well as another slight risk that extends all the way up to where we've been seeing a lot of severe weather constantly much of this week in southern Colorado into Oklahoma Panhandle. As for our threats, we do have a little bit of a 2% tornado threat, not as high as we've been seeing recently or what was forecasted. However, I will explain that, and we also do have a 2% tornado threat back towards the Oklahoma Panhandle into the Texas Panhandle. As for our winds threats, we do have a 15% extending across both enhanced risk and slight risk. As for the slight risk back towards the Oklahoma Panhandle, we don't really have all that much of a damaging wind increase. However, we do have a significant threat for most of that trailing slight risk, as well as a 30% for that enhanced risk on that 15%. We could possibly see gorilla-sized hail with a lot of this for today, and then as well as another significant threat on a 15% back towards the Oklahoma Panhandle and northern Texas Panhandle as well. Taking a look at our pivotal weather model, starting off with our 500 millibars like we usually do, you can see that we still have that extremely strong jet stream that is still continuing to make its way across the United States, specifically across Texas into the Dixie Valley area, across much of the southern part of the United States. This is going to be the main trigger for severe weather development. This is actually having a little bit of an impact on our tornado threat a little bit in a way that you wouldn't really expect. You would expect that this mid-level flow, this jet here, would particularly increase the shear. However, it's only increasing speed shear a little bit, leading to longer hodographs and not really directional shear, which is mostly needed for tornadic development. So this jet stream is decreasing our tornado threat a little bit, not allowing for directional shear, more so speed shear, and allowing for a very large hail threat instead of a strong tornado threat. If this was a trough, we could possibly see more of a tornado threat, but because it is just a one long straight line, this is mostly enhancing our hail threat a little bit and not our tornado threat. But we don't really have all that strong of a jet stream passing through this area in particular. However, it does look like it will be sufficient enough for a little bit of wind shear in place for some tornadic development. However, even if we do have longer hodographs, we do see a little bit of a directional shear with this, so we could possibly see a little bit of a 2% tornado threat, as well as having that extremely strong hail potential. Taking a look at our 700 millibars, we still have that shortwave trough that's moving through the area, which should help aid or trigger severe weather development, as well as possibly increase low-level shear a little bit and help with tornadic development. But overall, again, hail is more of a threat than tornadoes for today, but overall this should again help aid with severe weather development, as well as possibly aid in low-level wind shear. Taking a look at our dew points, let's focus on the Texas and the trailing slight risk for a second. You can see that we already have a dry line that is expected to develop to the west of that enhanced risk area, with a low inlet here between dew points in the mid 70s and dew points that are in 20s. So this should really aid in not only instability, but should also aid in severe weather development with a little bit of a warm boundary right here. There should be somewhat of a triple point somewhere around the enhanced risk area, which will aid in severe weather development, triggering that enhanced risk area for specifically only that region. That should again aid in severe weather development. But let's take a look at the enhanced or slight risk back towards the southern Colorado, Oklahoma Panhandle, and northern Texas area. We do have dew points that are kind of more increased compared to yesterday. We have dew points that are now in the mid to upper 50s, possibly the low 60s in some locations. Depending on the lapse rates, we could possibly see some upper moderate CAPE values. But with dew points that are in the 70s, mid 70s to upper 60s in the Texas area along that trailing slight risk as well, we could possibly see, depending on our lapse rates, possibly CAPE values that reach the 3000s and possibly the 4000s again like yesterday. Taking a look at our lapse rates, let's start off with Texas, where we see those intense dew points. we can already see off the bat we have some fairly strong lapse rates in the mid to upper sevens and possibly the eights in some isolated regions. That is expected to increase along the dry line area to more of the upper eights to mid eights and possibly the low nines in some isolated regions. This is potentially going to get our cape values up to the 4,500 range, definitely up to the 3,000s, possibly a little bit into the upper 3,000s and the mid 3,000s. And then further east you go, we do have some decreasing lapse rates, mostly in the sixes and sevens, not really in the eights. This is going to potentially have an effect on our cape, which will make it decrease the further east you go, but will definitely possibly get it up to the 3,000s. But then let's take a look at the slight risk back towards the Texas Panhandle and Oklahoma Panhandle. Our lapse rates do possibly reach the upper eights and possibly the nines in some regions, more so than back in Texas. But with the weaker dew points, this is going to possibly keep our K values mostly in the moderates in the 1,000s to 2,000s, possibly the 2,500 range. Taking a look at our instability, you can already see along that dry line that develops in Texas, you can see that we have some extremely strong instability, and in that little inlet there, there's simulated values of the upper 5,000s, and I think I saw some 6,000s a little bit earlier today, but this is definitely going to possibly reach the possible 4,000s, the mid 4,000s, to maybe even the upper 4,000s in some isolated regions. Definitely probably not getting up to the upper 5,000s, probably up to the mid 5,000s in that little inlet there. It's definitely possible, however, it may be a little bit unlikely. I'm unsure if it's going to be possible or not, but it definitely looks like it could be possible. But then let's look at the trailing slight risk. You can see that we do get cape values that do reach the 3,000s, but they kind of fluctuate between the moderates and upper highs in the 3,000s to possibly the 1,000s to 2,000s and possibly the 3,000 range. With this will definitely be sufficient enough for some tornadic development, especially along that 2% line, depending on our wind shear. But then let's take a look at the cape values back towards the Oklahoma Panhandle. We do get cape values that are mostly going to stay in the moderates in the 1,000s to 2,000s range. Depending on our wind shear, which this could be sufficient enough for some tornadic development, as well as the possibility of some very large hail, as well as, again, further down south, this is definitely going to be sufficient enough, depending on our wind shear again, for some very large hail. Taking a look at our wind shear, keep in mind how we have more of a possibility for some longer hodographs than curved hodographs. Let's start off with the trailing slight risk area with that enhanced risk in that 2% further down south. You can see that we do have some very strong wind shear that is in place in the 20 knots to possibly 30 knots in some areas. This is going to definitely be sufficient enough for some tornadic development if it was more of a directional shear than speed shear. Right now, this bulk shear is mostly going to be depicted as speed shear because of how long and straight the jet stream is across this area. This is definitely, again, going to be more speed shear than directional shear, leading to more of a large hail possibility than a tornadic possibility. Taking a look at some observed soundings, I think we're currently looking at north central Texas, which is part of that 2% tornado threat. We do have a little bit of a low level curve here, which is going to allow for a little bit of a tornado percent, mostly in the 2% range with the 20 knot low level shear. But then we do have a little bit of a wonky hodograph tail here, but it is, I think, expected to straighten out over time the later this day to more of a straighter line, so this is expected to bring more of a large hail threat than a tornado threat, mostly because directional shear is weaker. Taking a look at the speed profile further down right here, you can see in the low levels we do have some nice speed curve, which is going to allow for more of a speed shear instead of directional shear setup, which is going to allow for the possibility of some very large hail going into today. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator, and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. Hopefully I will see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.